Imagine a leader so powerful that he had himself declared the genius of the Carpathians, a man who built grand marble palaces while his people starved in the cold. A man who ruled with such an iron fist that every aspect of life, from what you ate to what you said, was controlled by his secret police. His name was Nicolae Ceasusescu, and for 24 years he and his equally ruthless wife, Elena, held Romania in a suffocating grip. But what if I told you that all that power, that godlike status, vanished in a single afternoon? That the golden era, as he called it, ended not with a bang, but with a frantic helicopter ride, a kangaroo court, and a brutal, chaotic final moment that was broadcast to the entire world. This isn't just a story about the fall of a dictator. It's a raw, uncensored look at the messy, violent and often unjust nature of revolution. First, let's meet our main characters. Nicolae Ceausescu was a simple cobbler's apprentice who rose through the ranks of the Romanian Communist Party. He was a master manipulator, and by 1965 he had taken control of the country. He soon began building a notorious cult of personality, demanding that he be praised as a living demigod. Statues and portraits of him were everywhere. The state-run media called him a secular god and a river of human consciousness. Beside him was his wife, Elena Ceausescu. She was more than just a first lady, she was a dictator in her own right. She held the second most powerful position in the government, controlled the secret police, and was awarded fake scientific honors despite having little education. She was known for her vulgar language, cruelty, and an insatiable appetite for luxury, all while her people had no heating, no electricity, and were forced to eat meager rations. Their rule was one of absolute terror. The Securitate, Ceausescu's secret police, spied on everyone, using torture and brutal imprisonment to silence any hint of dissent. Meanwhile, the Ceausescus lived a life of staggering excess, enjoying grand estates and exotic food, completely detached from the suffering they inflicted. But absolute power cannot last forever. By the late 1980s, Romania was a powder keg. The severe austerity measures, the chronic food shortages and the constant fear had finally worn people out. All it needed was a spark. That spark came on December 16, 1989, in the city of Timisoara. When a popular dissident pastor was ordered to leave his church, a crowd gathered to protest. The protests quickly grew, and the Securitate's violent response only made it worse. News of the brutal crackdown spread by word of mouth and foreign radio broadcasts, igniting a fire of anger across the country. On December 21, Nicolae Ceausescu attempted to address a massive rally in Bucharest, believing the crowds would cheer for him as they always did. He was wrong. The crowd began to boo. Their jeers turned into chants, and those chants turned into a full-scale riot. For the first time, he saw not admiration, but pure, unadulterated hatred in the eyes of his people. The next day, December 22, the revolution reached its climax. As huge, furious crowds surrounded the Central Committee building, the Ceausescus knew their time was up. They made a frantic escape to the roof, where a single military helicopter was waiting. The pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Vasil Malutsan, had been ordered to fly them to safety. Inside the helicopter, the dictators were in a state of utter shock. Elena cried out, "What's happening? Why are all these people here?" They were so disconnected from reality that they couldn't grasp the scale of the rage. The helicopter first tried to fly to a palace in Snagov and then to a rural retreat in Targov East. But the military was now siding with the revolutionaries and air traffic control was in their hands. Malutsan was told his flight would be shot down. In a desperate move, he landed in a field, abandoned his helicopter, and told the dictators they would have to find another way. Their journey was now a pathetic scramble. They hailed a car, then another, but were eventually found by the military. They were taken to a military barracks in Targovice, where they were held as prisoners. The once all-powerful dictators were now powerless. They were put in a small room with no heat, no water, and no luxury. When a military officer offered Nicolae a piece of bread, he refused, saying, "I am an emperor, I do not eat bread." He still believed in his own myths, even as the walls were closing in on him. But the story doesn't end there. What happened next was not a trial but an act of brutal, revolutionary justice. On December 25, Christmas Day, the Ceausescus were put before a hastily assembled military tribunal. The trial was a farce, lasting only a little over an hour. There were no defense lawyers, no time to prepare, and the verdict was already decided. The charges read out against them were genocide, undermining the national economy, and other high crimes. Ceausescu defiantly rejected the authority of the court, saying he would only answer to the Grand National Assembly. He refused to admit any wrongdoing, and Elena was equally arrogant, dismissing the court and its charges. The prosecutor delivered the verdict, guilty, the sentence, death. What followed was a scene of utter chaos and violence. The Ceausescus were led from the courtroom and out into the barracks courtyard. The camera, which had been recording the trial, continued to roll, capturing the grim reality of a revolution's final act. As they were lined up against a wall, Elena began to scream. A handful of soldiers raised their rifles. The order was given, but the firing squad was uncoordinated and chaotic. The bullets from their assault rifles tore into the bodies of the dictators. The video shows Nicolae and Elena collapsing in a heap, their bodies twisted and lifeless. The execution was brutal, messy, and far from a clean, dignified end. It was the raw, unpolished vengeance of a nation that had suffered for decades. Within hours, the video of the execution was broadcast on Romanian television. For millions, it was proof that the nightmare was over. But for many historians, the question remains, was it justice, or was it simply another act of violence? The trial was illegal, the executions were carried out without appeal, and the bodies were buried in unmarked graves. The events of December 25, 1989, were a chilling reminder that in the heat of a revolution, justice can be a messy and complicated affair. The golden era ended not with an elegant speech or a legal verdict, but with a horrifying, televised moment of bloody retribution. By understanding this dark chapter, we get a true picture of the dangers of absolute power and the terrifying, unpredictable forces of a people who have finally had enough.